Broadcasting live from the glorious eastern coast of Australia to the darkest corner of your greatest fears. Prepare yourself for terrifying tales of Yowies, UFOs, paranormal anomalies, and much more. Nothing is impossible, and nothing is off limits. Welcome to Believe the Night Shift with your host, Cade Moyer.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good night. It's a pleasure to be with you wherever you may be joining us from. We are broadcasting live to Facebook, YouTube, and of course our website. So if you're wanting the audio only version of that, you can head over there and also download the Mix XLR app and get it streaming directly to your phone. If you are watching this live on YouTube or on Facebook, please leave a comment in the sections and let us know where you are listening from. My name's Cade Moyer and I'm your tour guide on tonight's journey. And if you wish to join me, we will have open lines a little bit later on tonight. We've got to get into the juicy stuff first because this has been an absolute crazy week. The number is on the screen there. So the number is 0730403096. You can call in and share your strange encounters of the unusual and the unexplained. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. I am joined by Grant Lavac, and he is the host of The Unexplained Rundown on YouTube, and is the bloke who is absolutely filling my Twitter feeds at the moment. So, Grant, welcome to the show, mate.
Okay, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on and giving me a chance to talk with you and your listeners. It's good to be with you.
It's a real pleasure to have you here because my phone has been absolutely going off the hook at the moment because I'm getting friends, family, and just basically everyone who kind of knows that I do this podcast that's a little bit weird, kind of saying, like, are you seeing the news at the moment? Are you seeing what's going on over in the States and I guess in the Northern Hemisphere? Because it's kind of this genuinely worldwide phenomenon that's going on. And I guess to kind of bring people into the loop, there has been a fair bit of unusual activity going on in the skies, which has resulted in 4 objects being shot out of the sky by US military, which is basically unheard of in modern history, in just in anything. Nothing has really ever been shut down over US airspace. Honestly, I think in my entire lifetime. So
Our lifetime for sure. First time in 60 plus years that
yeah,
NORAD was given orders to shoot down over US
yeah.
airspace.
So
Yep.
this is genuinely uncharted territory for a majority of people who are potentially interested in the UFO I guess field. But mate, I have to tell you, you've been doing an incredible job on Twitter, kind of breaking down the information into, I guess, these bite-sized pieces of information that I'm a rather simple person, so I don't really go too deep into the, I guess, the real life side of these UFOs, because I mostly hang around the field of talking to people who have had experiences. But I really do love to increase my knowledge of, the world events that are going on, because this is something that's going to change the world. I think 2023 is the year that we get something big happening, and these are the first real steps of that, mate. I guess I'm going to give the floor to you, and kind of say, like, what do you think's been going on here, because this is crazy stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like in the last 2 weeks, we've gone from 0 to 100 in a couple of seconds. I mean, we've all known that this topic, those that avid enthusiasts on the UFO or the UAP topic, we know that there's been a steady ramp up of information coming out ever since the New York Times published their articles in December of 2017, and everything since then has kind of been, this snowball is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then a couple of weeks ago, we get this big Chinese spy balloon that's floating across the continental United States, and everyone's wondering, why is the US letting it just float across? Why aren't they taking it down? So for all of about 5 minutes, that was interesting and taking a lot of airtime, the 24-hour news cycle. But then all of a sudden you have a second, and then a third, and then a fourth object, which to this day remain classified as unidentified aerial objects. Hopefully not a new acronym that we have to deal with. But in an unprecedented move, President Biden came out overnight, and the first sitting president that I can remember that has publicly addressed the UFO or the UAP topic. And he's essentially saying that these last three shootdowns still remain unidentified. So what the heck are they? If they're not Chinese, well, what are they? Where they're from? What was their intent? Why were they flying in FAA regulated airspace? Why don't we know more? Why are US senators like Senator Marco Rubio coming out of a classified briefing earlier in the day and saying, look, 95% of the information that was discussed in that classified briefing should be made available to the general public? Why hasn't the general public heard more about these last three? Why it's like there's this lack of transparency at the moment on these last three objects, which debris hasn't even been retrieved yet. So what the heck's going on? So there's a lot more questions than answers.
Absolutely. And I find it really fascinating about this whole debris thing, because one of them was kind of shot over Alaska, over the frozen sea. And, that's solid ice. You can walk out there for days and basically pick up the whatever is supposed to be down there. And it's rather interesting, because I saw Ross Coulthard shared a video from someone on Twitter who is basically at that crash site, is lucky enough to, be in traveling distance or is living there, and is out there almost on the daily, kind of saying, look, there's no one out here. This is really weird. No one's looking for this stuff. And as you can see, it is just a white sheet. You'll be able to find anything on there. And in the video, he even just kind of kicks a bit of dirt on there, and it absolutely is incredibly visible because of how stark the landscape is.
Yeah. Where are the crash retrieval teams? If they're going to be so keen to get that debris, well, where is the evidence that there's been anyone out there? So there's a lot more questions remain unanswered on, well, why hasn't debris been recovered? Why haven't we seen any of the the gun camera footage. I mean, these F-22s and these fighter jets are equipped with some of the best, particularly US Air Force fighter jets are equipped with some unbelievable sensors. And, I mean, we've already heard the audio commentary, the pilot's description come out of the Lake Huron object, and his description was pretty chilling when you listen to it. But where's the rest of the data? Where's the video footage? Where's the gun camera footage or FLIR footage if they use it? And that last object that over Lake Huron, which I believe was only floating around 20,000 feet. I mean, that's not, you look at the fidelity of some of the images that members of the general public were taking on the ground of the Chinese spy balloon. Pretty impressive high resolution images. Well, Lake Huron is obviously it's pretty massive, but anyone with a powerful photographic lens and some work could potentially get some good footage. So surely there has to be some footage of that last object that was brought down. So, and I'm just baffled as to why we still don't know more on those remaining 3 objects. They continue to be true UAP for the moment.
Yeah, and like you said there earlier, we are getting these conflicting, I guess, identification terms of what these things are, because it really depends on who's handling essentially that press conference at that point in time, because we are getting all these different names for what they are in the sky, and we're getting different classifications for what they are, and for me, that really does raise a lot of red flags of like, do they know what's going on in there? Are the teams talking to each other about the information that's being processed? Because this is something that's never been discussed on such a public forum in such a time. And like you said there earlier, the president is coming out and even saying that these things are unidentified, and he would be under an immense amount of pressure to essentially come forward and let the people know if these things are genuine UFOs. And then the question is, if these are UFOs, what are they, or where do they come from? And that's a really, really big question. And it seems like the genuine worldwide public is now ready for this.
I agree. I mean, and Australia is unfortunately the exception to the rule. The Australian government and Australian Department of Defence has its head buried on the sand on this topic, and they have, since the Royal Australian Air Force stopped looking into UAPs, or what they called unusual aerial sightings, UAS, back in the day. So in 1996, they stopped taking reports and investigating UFOs, and they haven't looked into this topic since 1996, and they have no desire to collaborate with allies on this issue. And that's a statement that's come directly from documents that I've been able to secure through FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. And you have the US, our Five Eyes partner and AUKUS partner, that is really taking a serious look at this issue and saying, look, these UAP, more so now than ever, pose a national security threat and a safety of flight risk. And we need to get to the bottom of this problem. So much so that President Biden has now ordered the establishment of a whole of government interagency office that's going to try and better understand this issue, which I'm puzzled by, because anyone that follows this topic knows that the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022, Congress legislated, and it's mandated that the US Department of Defense establish an office dedicated to the investigation of UAP. And that's gone through a couple of iterations. We know it was originally the UAP Task Force, then it became AIMSOG, which was the most ridiculous acronym, and now it's ARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. So if there's already this office established, which the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 23 only strengthened the resolve capability and responsibilities and powers of this ARO office, then why is there the need for establishing a brand new one? It seems like an absolute waste of US taxpayer money by having two offices that are competing on the same mandate. So, but credit to the US, they're actually doing something about it, which is in stark contrast to the Australian Department of Defence. They've still got their head buried in the sand on this topic and refuse to take it seriously. And for any of your listeners and viewers that have been following what's been happening in an Australian context, which has really been my focus from day one, I always ask myself the question, well, the US is taking this so seriously. Well, what is Australia doing about UAPs? And so I discovered that on the 27th of October of 2021, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, who's the senator for Tasmania, he's the only senator to date that's had the courage and gumption to ask questions about UAP, UFO in an Australian context. And in a Senate estimates hearing on the 27th of October of 2021, he asked the then Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Mel Hupfield, about UAP and what is Australia doing about UAP? Because earlier that year, the preliminary assessment came out from the ODNI on UAP. And since then, Senator Whish-Wilson has continued to ask questions of the Royal Australian Air Force, the Chief of Air Force, on UAP. And it was only on Wednesday of this week that he once again asked the current Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, about, well, now with everything that's happening in the US and this unprecedented situation where the US has shot down 4 or 3 unidentified aerial objects and 1 spy balloon, what is Australia's response to something that would be comparable? What would the Royal Australian Air Force do if there was a foreign adversarial spy balloon or surveillance object that came across our land? Would we shoot it down and so on? And I found it very interesting that the Royal Australian Air Force to date has been very much of the mantra, move along, folks, there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to this topic. But all of a sudden, following the events of these 4 shoot downs, the Royal Australian Air Force, under the leadership of Air Marshal Robert Chipman, have now been briefed by the United States on the Chinese spy balloon, and they have sought additional information on these 3 unidentified aerial objects. So it's taken a shoot down event, unprecedented event of 4 aircraft shot down, for the Royal Australian Air Force to get off their ass and say, well, we need to learn what's going on in the US to maybe ensure that we're covering our backsides down under. So I'm thankful that it's kind of come to this point, that it's woken the giant within, so to speak, with the Royal Australian Air Force. But there are still a lot of questions that I've got as to, well, why didn't they do anything earlier? There's contradictory evidence on Air Marshal Robert Chipman saying earlier this week that he hasn't been briefed, or the Royal Australian Air Force hasn't been briefed by the UAP task force. Yet Ross Coulthardt's reporting, I should say, on Sky News Australia just earlier this week completely contradicts that. His sources are telling him that Australian Defence Attaché in Washington, D.C. Have been briefed by the US on the UAP topic. So either Air Marshal Rob Chipman is being deceitful, or he is completely ignorant to what is going on in his unit, or there are people that simply aren't telling him what's going on behind his back. So there's a lot more questions that need to be asked and answered, and I suspect Senator Whish-Wilson will have quite a few questions on notice that he'll be submitting for follow-up to the Royal Australian Air Force.
Yeah, this is particularly why I love following you on Twitter, because you're an absolute mongrel, mate, because you're not scared to really stick it to these guys and get in there and actually contact the people who have the right access to the right people and really send them the tough questions. And it really puzzles me that Australia essentially does have its head in the sand when it comes to UFOs, because you could just essentially go back to 1966 at Westall, which is one of Australia's, if not the world's, in fact it is, it's in one of the world's largest group sightings for a UFO and potentially extraterrestrial beings encounter. And this really effectively just doesn't exist within the government. It's wiped essentially from history. It's really only held together by the very loyal people who were there when they encountered it, and the people who are desperate to get that story out, because there was some silencing acts that were done to teachers, and it was rather dangerous in those situations. But Australia really had the opportunity to take the forefront when it comes to UFOs all the way back then, and it's a real shame that essentially 60, 70 years later that we're no better off. We're no steps ahead. We're actually just essentially taking steps backwards, because I've spoken to multiple pilots who have commercial pilots, not fighter pilots, nothing Air Force or anything like that. This is commercial pilots who have seen things, but they just don't talk about it. They don't share it. They don't report it, because there's nothing to it in Australia, which is dangerous and unfortunate.
Yeah, look, it's a sad reality that the Australian government, via the Australian Department of Defence and Royal Australian Air Force, is really treating this topic like it's isolated to the United States, which is absolute BS, because Australia, via the Royal Australian Air Force, has almost as long as a history investigating UFOs as the US does. We had an investigative body dating back to the 1950s in Australia. Had the good work of Harry Turner, who is a nuclear scientist that was tasked to try and better understand what UAS or UFOs were all about. And his kind of research and recommendations and advocacy for the topic kind of fell on deaf ears. And I really feel for anyone that has seen something they're not able to identify and they're puzzled by it, like the witnesses of the Westall event, as well as any military pilots and aviators that have seen something they haven't been able to reconcile in their head, and then they report it and their report falls on deaf ears, or they don't report it because they're so fearful of being ridiculed, and there's this level of stigma that's associated with the topic. I mean, I can only imagine how demoralizing it must feel for the Westall witnesses and military pilots and aviators that do say something and then they're not believed, they're not taken seriously, and they're kind of they're treated like an outcast, and they're ostracized, and they're kind of cast to the side. So it's kind of a slap in the face to anyone that's ever seen something that they can't. I mean, all we want, and this is the thing I've said repeatedly, and this is actually from Ross directly, because I'm on have private communications with Ross. He said, all we want, those of us in Australia that know the Australian government has not been taking this topic seriously, all we want is for UFOs, UAP, to be acknowledged, to be investigated, and a conclusion drawn on what they are, what's their origin, and maybe when are they from, because there are a whole myriad of there's a whole menu, a smorgasbord selection of explanations that could be attributed to UAP. Extraterrestrial is the one that everyone jumps to straight away, but we know that UAP could be foreign adversarial systems in technology. Hopefully not, but it could be. It could be atmospheric phenomena or other benign phenomena. It could be airborne clutter. It could be something entirely different. It could be interdimensional in nature. It could be future human, which Ross has talked about time and time again. It could be something that's ultra terrestrial. We've never been able to pick up, or we don't have strong enough sensor systems to detect what other entities might be inhabiting and sharing this planet with us. I mean, they're all everything should be on the table until it's not. So that's kind of that's I just feel for folks that have said something and they've been shamed or ridiculed for it, because the walls of stigma have been standing tall on this topic for 75 plus years, and we're now only starting to break them down. And it's just unfortunate when the media plays the bloody X-Files music at the start of a news coverage. They don't take it seriously. They have a little chuckle. I mean, anyone that saw the Senate estimates hearing on the 9th of November last year, Senator Wish Wilson was questioning Air Marshal Robert Chipman, and the Foreign Affairs Minister, Senator Penny Wong, interjected and flatly said, "Is this a UFO question?" And then had a bit of a giggle, in her hand. So you've got this, stigma and ridicule and ignorance that still unfortunately plagues this topic. And it's, folks like anyone that advocates for this topic, you talking with your audience, you've got Ross Coulthard. I mean, I'm really standing on the shoulders of giants like Ross Coulthard, like Bill Chalker, Keith Basterfield, Paul Dean. These guys have been advocating and championing this topic for such a long time. And George Knapp in the US, and love him or hate him, believe him or don't, Lou Elizondo, Christopher Mellon, the great reporting that comes out of folks like Tyler Rogaway and Christopher Sharp and Leslie Keane and Ralph Blumenthal. There's a lot of good people that are trying to get the answers and uncover the truth on this topic. And we need more people like that, and we need more people like Senator Wish Wilson to ask questions and elevate the conversation on this topic in government, because it will far too easily just fall by the wayside and just get swept under the rug.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And, it's a shame that it really takes a journalist like Ross Coulthard of his pedigree to start talking about it, that the Australian media really starts to pay attention to it. Channel 7 seems to be a rather large advocate of the UFO hype, and that also could just be for obvious ratings reasons. But it's good that we do have this single outlet that seems to be taking a serious approach to it, rather than, like you say, the typical media response of just the X-Files music being played. I refuse to do a lot of radio interviews these days, purely for the reason I say, if you're going to play the X-Files music, don't worry, piss off. I don't want anything to do with you, because you instantly discredit anyone who's had genuine encounters with these things, and it's not really something to be made a mockery of. It's just flat out rude at the end of the day, and it's something that should be taken seriously, because you'd never know, it could be something genuinely dangerous.
And look, I give credit to the Australian news media as well. I mean, they have been covering this topic more diligently than they have in the past, and they get the likes of Jeremy Corbell come on Sunrise, and they've had John Greenwald Jr. of the blackvault.com on as well. So it's great that those guys are increasing an awareness of this topic to the masses and those news outlets. But my gripe with the Australian news media is, I would just wish that they would exercise 1 ounce of journalistic due diligence and ask the questions that I and my colleagues and so many people that I correspond with on Twitter want answered. Why is Australia not taking this topic seriously when our US ally and Five Eyes partner is? And that's been my mission from day one, to try and get, I'm a very proud, patriotic Australian. I'm proud of the alliance that we share with our US brothers and sisters across the pond. I just want us to collaborate with them and get to the bottom of this riddle, rather than wait another 75 years. I want to be alive still when this is resolved. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where she can hopefully, stand up and look at the sky and think, we've answered one of the 3 important questions in life. Are we alone in the universe? What happens when you die? And, what's the other one we always, is there a God? They're the big 3, I guess. And if we can answer one of those, are we alone in the universe? I think we will all start looking at each other differently and interacting very differently. And we can then slowly make our way towards becoming a type 1 civilization, where we are advancing science and technology for the betterment of humanity, rather than having this tribalism and warring world that we live in, where it's all about power and control and global spectrum dominance. So that's my wish for my little one when she grows up.
Yeah, and I'm with you as well, because I've got a bunch of little kids waiting at home, and it's the same. It's something that I wish, I'd love to see it in my lifetime, but I just don't think that's going to be a reality, unfortunately. I don't want that to be the case. Obviously, I'd love to find out in my lifetime, but it is something that I even kind of discuss this with my children, and they're fairly young, and I say, don't don't be surprised if you find out spaceships are real and things like that, because my little one, she always asks, oh, what do you do? What do you talk about? And I have these great fantastic artworks on my wall in my office of things that probably children would be quite frightened of, and I say that's nothing to be scared of at the moment.
Yeah.
Because we don't know, everything's kind of just up in the air, but it does excite me, and I think this year is going to be a really, really good opportunity for a lot of genuine journalists to make up their mind about where they stand on these types of issues and decide if they're going to dive in properly on it. Because if you think of how small the pool is of journalists who are doing this in a way that is done correctly, if even if 50% of the journalists out there had a 10% interest in this, that wrote truthfully about it, did 10 minutes of research on it, oh man, that excites me, because I think what will come out then would be just astronomical, not only from a government standpoint, but from the people who feel comfortable to come forward and say, no, I've had these types of encounters. I think that would be genuinely groundbreaking.
Yep, I totally agree. I mean, look at what compared to folks that have been researching this topic for a long time. I mean, Ross Coulthard is relatively new to the game of investigative journalism on this topic. But look at what he's been able to achieve and the network of contacts and trusted sources that he's been able to acquire in a relatively short period of time. And I think this is Ross has said this a number of times, that his wish is that other investigative journalists that are a member of the consortium of international and investigative, I think there's a group that Ross is part of, International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, if they started taking the topic seriously and asking the same questions that he has of folks that are elected into positions of leadership in their respective countries. Because unfortunately, Ross and Senator Wish Wilson, they can't do it all themselves. Ross we all only have 24 hours in the day, and poor old Ross is totally inundated with messages, emails, calls, witnesses coming forward to him, military, current and former. So I think the sooner that we have more members of the news media and investigative journalists coming forward on this topic and saying there's something that's not right here. This topic has been something that's been sitting not quite right about it for more than 75 years. And it's time that we now, particularly as there's this paradigm shift with what has happened today with President Biden's historic public address and just over the last 2 weeks, I hope that more members of the news media take this topic seriously and think, geez, this could be the actual biggest story of all time, rather than just letting it fall to the wayside and wait for the next clickbait news story to come along. So, I agree with you. I think 2023, there's a lot to look forward to this year, because if you're familiar with the legislation that's included in the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 23, there are whistleblower protections in there. So folks that have been
best.
Yeah, so folks that know something but have never been able to say something before about these, clandestine or waived, unacknowledged access, special access programs, or SAPs and WUSAPs, if they've been involved in programs that have been tasked with reverse engineering, non-human or non-human craft, or craft off this, not of this world, they're now in a position where they can legally come forward and not fear reprisals or being ridiculed or losing their job or risking their pension or promotion, because they now have protections in place by the US government to allow them to speak in a classified setting to members of the US Congress. And I hope that we will see more public hearings at some point throughout this year. We had a historic event in May of last year, the first public hearing on UAP UFO that I've ever been privy to. So first for both you and I, first one in 54 years. And hopefully there'll be more and more public hearings on this topic, because there are folks like Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Blumenthal. These guys believe that the US government should be transparent on this topic and should tell the public what it knows, what it can tell them anyway. So I hope that the provisions that are in the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 23 will start to really move the needle on this topic. And I think a lot of other countries like Australia, like the UK, like New Zealand, all Five Eyes members will start to pull their heads out of their ass and take this topic seriously. Because at the moment, the only two countries that are taking it seriously, like quite seriously, is the US and Canada. I mean, we know that Brazil has obviously had some hearings of some sort last year, so they're obviously taking it seriously. We know that France has a history of investigating this topic. So hopefully the snowball continues to roll and get bigger and bigger and bigger, where there's no stopping it. And once the cat's out of the bag, it's full steam ahead. So hopefully, I agree with you. Hopefully later this year we start to get a lot more traction on this topic.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, that whole whistleblower clause it's something that I've been so excited about for months and months and months since I heard about it, because it's genuinely going to change the whole UAP field. How much of it is going to come out to the public, who knows? But what it also means is that I think a lot of people are going to start leaking that information, because there is a genuine want for this information to come out. And I know that that's my little tinfoil hat on there to say that, people are going to leak this information, but you just have to look at what happened with these UFOs that got shot down, that the transcript leaked from that. And that was only a couple of days ago.
Yep.
Imagine if there was something that came out where someone said, look, I had hands-on experience with UFO craft, and I was working with Bob Lazar. Like, let's make a ridiculous scenario like that. But what that does is that genuinely creates a whole bunch of credibility for one of the biggest story of our lifetimes.
And look, leaking's already happened. I mean, if you want to call it a leak or an unclassified or an unofficial disclosure, I guess, of the three videos, Tic Tac, Gimbal, and Go Fast of 2017, courtesy of Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon. And now you've got Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp that are receiving footage and photographs from members of the military. So there are these leaks that I think will continue to happen out of frustration. Members of the military that do take this topic seriously, and there's a lot of them out there. I mean, look at the great work that Ryan Graves has been doing to advocate for this topic and the safety of flight risks that are posed.
Absolutely.
And you've got other members as well that are gravely concerned. And anyone that watches Ross Coulthard and Zabel on Need to Know, Ross is under the belief, based on what he has heard from his sources, that the establishment of this whole of government new interagency is the result of a complete lack of trust between the White House and the Pentagon, that the US Air Force for so long has not played ball on this topic. They've noticed how the ODNI's preliminary assessment and 2022 annual report on UAP had literally no input from the US Air Force. Very, very little. I mean, all of the things that we've heard about, Tic Tac, Go Fast, Gimbal, a lot of these range Fowler reports, right, that were released not long ago through FOIA. This is all US Navy stuff that's coming out. Where the hell is the US Air Force in all of this? Why haven't they come forward and stepped into the ring and played their part in having conversations? So if anyone watches that Need to Know podcast that happened, I think it was yesterday, there is certainly something strange going on with the establishment of this new whole of government agency. Potentially, could it be because that there is this such distrust between the White House and the US Air Force? Possibly.
Yeah, it really does make it a rather exciting time because, like you said, there's a lot of different outlets out there right now that are doing fantastic work. Because you've got that Need to Know podcast with Ross and Bryce Sable.
Yeah, Bryce
You've
Sable.
got the merged podcast, and we've got the Weaponized podcast, and all of these are done by very, very influential people. And they are all talking to very high level people within, potential military outlets, getting firsthand encounters of events that they've basically experienced.
Yep.
And these are trained professionals. These are people who are essentially paid observers. These aren't people who are making things up because the thing at the end of the day, what's firefighter got to gain from making up a story about this? Nothing. There's everything to lose.
100%. And you got more and more people coming forward. I mean, we still don't know there's still no clear definitive explanation as to Tic Tac, Go Fast, and Gimbal. And Tic Tac was 2004, and Gimbal and Go Fast, which potentially part of the same event. That's the theory that's been thrown around. There's still no definitive explanation as to what they are. And people like PJ Hughes, who was in the Hawkeye of the 2004 Nimitz incident. He's now he's coming forward a little bit more frequently and talking about. You've got. Chad Underwood was on the pilot who actually filmed the Tic Tac encounter of 2004. He was on with Tucker Carlson on Fox News recently, talking about it. So I think there is this safety and strength in numbers now for more and more members of the military, current and former. I mean, look at Weaponized. They had a current member of the U.S. Navy on talking about the recent happening. So that's why I say credit to folks like Ryan Graves, who through the introduction of his podcast, he's now creating a safe space for other aviators, pilots, and subject matter experts to come forward and talk about it. And the more conversations that are had on this topic, I think you'll get more and more people come forward and not feel like they have to stay anonymous and stay in the shadows because there's going to be this stigma and ridicule. I mean, no one wants to be judged. And I was always a little bit apprehensive when I first started diving into this topic a little bit more seriously. Well, how will my friends and family kind of react if I tell them I'm hardcore into this topic? And they've just been interested to learn more and more about it. And a funny encounter I had when I'm originally from Sydney, but live in Melbourne now. And I was traveling to Sydney last year to visit my family, my mum and my stepdad. And I was going through the security screening checkpoint, and they flagged my carry-on bag, and they opened it up. And I was reading a book at the time by Dr. Lynn Kitai on the Phoenix Lights. And the security checkpoint baggage kind of guy, he said, that's about the Phoenix Lights, the UFOs. And we ended up just getting into a conversation for about 10 minutes, just talking about, UFOs, UAP, and, both had the same degree of enthusiasm about the topic. So I think you'd be surprised how people would react when you actually, open up and share what you believe and what is important to you, because a lot of people are curious and they're just as intrigued. And I think a lot of folks, the giggles and the laughter that happens in numbers is, I think it's a reaction to maybe them not wanting to be ridiculed if they take the topic seriously. So I think, unfortunately, the shoe's going to be on the other foot for a lot of people that do laugh and think this is all BS and a lot of hoo-ha. Well, the stigma that we have experienced for too long is going to be on the other foot eventually, because when the cat's out of the bag, that this topic, there's a there to this phenomena, and it's real, and it's not something that's science fiction, which members of the Australian Defence Force and Royal Australian Air Force believe that it is science fiction, because that's been shown in Freedom of Information Act documents that I secured. People that don't take this topic seriously, they're the ones that are going to be laughed at and ridiculed in due course. So, I think we just need to be adults and acknowledge, certainly people in Australian government need to acknowledge that a conversation needs to now be had on this topic rather than just pushing it to the side.
Absolutely. And there's one thing that I think is really glaringly obvious, is that it seems like our governments aren't trying to get ahead of this, because if you lose control of this situation and the public has the right to the narrative of it, that can be really potentially dangerous, because you just have to look at when everyone went into lockdowns, how crazy the world kind of went there. And if you asked me like a year ago if I thought the world was ready for disclosure, the answer, I said no. I did not think we were as a group of people. I don't think the world was ready. But after what I've seen with the events that's gone on with these shootdowns, my perspective has completely changed. And I do think we're ready for it. But how they control that situation or make sure it doesn't kind of just spiral out of control, that's a really glaringly obvious problem that could potentially happen.
Yeah, because no doubt about it that if there was, let's say, a scenario where there was a significant disclosure event, the proverbial UFO that lands on the White House lawn, I think you'd have some people that don't believe what they're reading or seeing, but then you would have a lot of other folks that their lives are turned completely upside down. Global financial markets may shift. You have, what happens to religious institutions and folks that have very strong faith. Will that impact their beliefs or not? I think, if you think about what's been happening since 2017, a lot of people I've spoken to, and I believe this to be true to a degree, that there has been kind of like a very drip feed, a slow controlled dissemination of information or disclosure over time. I mean, if you believe what Lou Elizondo says, and that, well, if disclosure, and I think disclosure is very subjective, it means different things for different people. But
yeah, totally.
If you believe that, if you want, if disclosure to you means that UFOs are real, well, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. government has come out and said that UFOs are real. So it's really what you believe is disclosure. I mean, some folks want to go down the full route of evidence of some non-human intelligence or extraterrestrial presence that's visitation of Earth, or that's been here for a long time. I don't know. I just want to, I want those that I elect into positions of authority to follow the data and follow the science wherever it leads them. Follow the facts wherever they lead. And that's what I really admire about folks like Professor Avi Loeb of the Galileo Project. I mean, he has been able to, crowdsource or source such an incredible cross-section of subject matter experts and talent that are exploring now this topic and trying to capture some high fidelity footage and photos with high resolution of UAP, so that it can be studied, it can be open sourced, it can be scrutinized, it can be analyzed, and some hypotheses can be made about what they are, where they're from, what their intent is. And there can be a very systematic, scientific, and academic approach taken to the topic, rather than just relying on government to disclose what it knows. And I think we're probably more likely to learn more from the likes of the Galileo Project than we are from our own governments. So that's why I'm a strong supporter of the work of the Galileo Project, and encourage folks to consider supporting to that endeavor as well if they're interested.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really does go hand in hand with the whole thing that I was trying to say there before. You're way more you're much better at explaining it, but essentially, like that is the thing that will let the governments lose control of the situation.
The narrative,
because when if Avi comes out and says we've got this genuine hard evidence, there's no denying it, it's going to leave a lot of the world governments with eggs on their face, because
Yep,
one,
100%.
you've either been lying, two, you're all your technology is being deceived. And three is like, are we safe? Because obviously you're not the people to do that for us anymore.
Yeah, and I think a big fear that the US government now has, I mean, if it's true that the US government, there are gatekeepers within the basements at the Pentagon, figuratively speaking, that have been guarding the secrets of this topic for so long through crash retrieval programs and technology, and they've been sitting on it for so long in such siloed and compartmentalized programs that they have never been able to get to the bottom of it and understand it, because compartmentalization doesn't allow for any collaboration or communication with other like-minded experts. It's very siloed. People only know about what they're working on and not what someone else is working on. And science doesn't work that way. If you want to advance science and technology, I think it has to be a collaborative effort, and it has to be one where the results and data can be analyzed, can be scrutinized, can be replicated. So I think that if it's true that the US government has been sitting on these secrets for 75 plus years, going back to Roswell or before that, Trinity of 1945, and they have recovered or retrieved some form of technology that is not of this earth, and they've been sitting on that for a long time, heads will roll, and there will be potentially a huge degree of, it could be a litigation nightmare for the US government. So I think they're really now maybe shitting bricks on how they need to address this issue and come out and be transparent, but do it in a way that doesn't expose them, give them a great degree of exposure through civil litigation or criminal litigation. I mean, what if crimes have been committed by folks in the military at command level that have been sitting on this, and they had an obligation to report on it, or even just a duty of care that they had to adhere to. I mean, if you look at, this is the one thing that's confused me, and I know my responses tend to be a bit long-winded and sometimes a bit jambled.
Mate, you make my job easy. I like it.
I mean, so the US Air Force has now just brought down a Chinese spy balloon and 3 unidentified aerial objects, the first shoot-down order that NORAD's had in 60 plus years. Yet the US Navy allows a swarm of drones or unidentified anomalous objects to hover or fly with impunity above their warship or carrier group and just come and go when they please. And the US Navy really did nothing about it. I mean, that to me sounds like a massive intelligence failure on the part of the US Navy and the Pentagon. Well, why aren't they bringing down drones or these unidentified anomalous phenomena that are swarming over US warships and carriers? Why aren't they potentially bringing down these these cubes in translucent spheres that military aviators have encountered almost on a daily basis for a couple of years on the east coast of the United States? Those pose a clear safety of flight risk. And that's exactly the reasons why, according to President Biden, that these 3 objects were brought down, because they pose a civilian safety of flight risk. So why is the US Department of Defense putting US military aviators and pilots' lives at risk and their well-being in jeopardy by allowing all this to happen, and for so long not having any sensible say something reporting mechanisms in place that military pilots and aviators could come forward and report on it? Thankfully, now that has shifted and people are reporting on it. We've seen that with the number of cases that the RO office has or ODNI has reported in its 22 annual report. But shame on the U.S. Department of Defense and the Air Force if they have known about this topic for a lot longer than they have, and they've done nothing about it to put lives at risk and they've massive breach of duty of care by not looking after the welfare of their pilots and their aviators.
And not only that, the fact that they've essentially built this stigma right into the zeitgeist of the world, that the amount of lost history or lost I guess experiences is just unfathomable, because we could have been potentially light years ahead of where we are within this UFO field, if the discussion was open, if the discussion was trustworthy 50 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's what really gets under my skin. If the US government has been sitting on technology through these so-called successful crash retrieval programs, and they've been sitting on that technology in the interest of national security rather than the betterment or the advancement of humanity, that really pisses me off, because you need to surely you can have a balance between national security and the advancement of science and technology. I mean, we're still, to Stephen Greer's, Dr. Stephen Greer's credit, I mean, I know he's a controversial character, but a lot of the work that he did early on to really found and forward the disclosure movement, credit where credit is due. And he said it time and time again that we as a civilization are too dependent on fossil fuels and the petrodollar, when if there is these technologies that have been mastered or we've got access to, that are hidden away under lock and key and never to be revealed, because when you tell your friends, you tell your enemies, and that's a game changer. If your enemies know that you've got anti-gravitics, or you're able to in these black budget projects create craft that can defy the known laws of physics, then that's you're telling your enemies that you've got that technology. So, but shame on the governments of the world if they have been sitting on this technology that could advance advance the betterment of humanity, because I don't see how we as a species are going to be able to break away from the warring tribalism that has plagued us as a species for millennia. And if we ever want to get to, like I said, that type 1 civilization where we can live on a sustainable planet, then we're sure as hell not setting ourselves up for a good future.
No, not at all. And to be honest, we're probably a couple of generations away from even scratching the surface of making that transition at this stage. But I tell you what, Grant, you have been an absolute cracker of a guest to have the show tonight, mate.
Now, I feel really bad, because I know that you had lines potentially open for a period there, so I've sucked out all your airtime. But if you want to open it up to some of your callers, feel free. I'm happy to stay on for as long as you need me.
Well, what we'll do is, mate, I do have to wrap it up rather soon, but I will do another call-in show. And, mate, if you are keen, we can get you on for another one where we can get all the calls coming in and get people to share their UFO encounters and things like that. If that's something that you're interested in, mate, because open door to have you back anytime, because one, you make my job easy. Two, you're very knowledgeable. And we did have a couple of callers that did try to call in, so I do apologize for not getting you through, but the conversation was just really rich, and Grant loves to talk, and I wouldn't have been able to shut him up.
I know. I don't. Some have told me I have the gift of the gab. But look, what I would say in closing is, I'm just one guy playing my part, exercising my right to information, and advocating for this topic that I believe in. So to any of your listeners or anyone that's watching, wondering what they can do to try and make a difference, I would encourage you to contact your elected representative, your member of parliament, your senator. Tell them that this topic is important to you. In light of everything that's happening in the United States at the moment, it's imperative that the Australian government take this topic seriously. And there's other things that you can do as well. You can share the word about shows like yours. If there is an article that you've read that you feel would be of benefit to someone that is undecided on this topic, feel free to have the conversation around the table at home, or have a chat to someone that you think might be interested to hear your thoughts. So I would say, if you want to play your part, and it's important to you, this topic, if you want to engage your elected representatives like I have, I've been fortunate enough that I've been now in a position to have frequent ongoing engagement with Senator Wish Wilson. And a lot of the questions, actually all of the questions that he asked at the Senate estimates hearing on the 9th of November of last year, I authored those questions with some of my colleagues. So that's not to impress you, but to impress upon your viewers and your listeners that you can engage your elected representatives and you can influence their thinking on this topic, because they don't have the time or the staff to commit to the research and exploration on this topic like we do, because we're passionate about it and we're interested in it. If you want to get answers to questions that you've got, I would also encourage you to submit a Freedom of Information Act request. You as an Australian taxpayer, a citizen, have a right to that information. So you can submit FOIA requests if there is a specific document that you would like to secure the release of, and so on. So I'm, again, just sitting on the shoulders of giants like the John Greenwald Juniors of the world. I've had the privilege of learning from him and consider him to be a great mentor and friend. So if you want to do something to further and advance the conversation on this topic in your community or at your local or federal government level, you can.
Yeah, and that's some really fantastic advice, because I tell you, I think you're doing a really fantastic job, and personally, I think you're definitely going to be a person to watch over the next the next year or two, because I think you're doing fantastic work, and you're kind of my go-to guy on Twitter, because you decipher it in a way that's simple for me to understand it, and you not only that, you also give me that Australian point of view, which is so sorely missed in this whole UFO thing, because it is, for some reason, it seems to be a US only kind of experience, but as we know, it is worldwide.
Well, look, and I'm certainly not a one-man band, and I have to shout out, I did see him in the chat earlier, but good pal James, Jimmy, he's been great. I mean, he does a lot of research on his own, and he shares with me a lot of articles that he comes across with respect to drones, quantum physics, what's happening in other countries. So if you develop your own little network of folks that have a passion for this topic as well, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be watching shows like this and engaging in the chat, or just having conversations with your friends, family, social network, that's a really good way to, again, strengthen numbers and safety in numbers. The more people you can engage on this topic and get it out in the open, the walls of stigma will come crumbling down.
Absolutely. Well, Grant, thank you so much for your time tonight, mate. You've been an absolutely fantastic guest. So you're a top bloke to talk to. I think I can talk your ear off for hours and hours to come. And I think this is probably just the start of a pretty good friendship, to be honest.
Look, I appreciate you having me on, Kate. So it's great to have an opportunity just to share some perspectives, things that I've learned along the way. I'm still very much a sponge on this topic, so I really appreciate you inviting me on to have a chat. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no worries, mate. So, guys, thank you so much for everyone who's joined us tonight. It's been a real pleasure. I see the chats have been going fairly good on YouTube and on Facebook. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in on the website as well, listen to the audio-only version of this. Guys, if you do like the podcast, be sure to head over to believepod.com and subscribe. There's a whole bunch of free episodes that you can sink your teeth into. We're up to season 17 of the podcast at the time time of recording. So there is literally tons of UFO encounters that you can go through and listen to if we have inspired the UFO hunter within you tonight. But we will be back in a couple of weeks for another live. But until the meantime, I have been Cade, and you have been listening to Believe the Night Shift. Cheers.
Thanks, Cade.